Hey everyone, we're back again for another episode of Owning Your Sexual Self, and I have another fellow sex therapist on with me today. Jessica is our guest for today, and she is a licensed and certified relationship and sex therapist, and she helps both couples and individuals cultivate deeper intimacy, emotional safety, and honest communication through a trauma-informed, somatic, and evidence-based approach. With specialized experience in supporting LGBTIA plus clients, neurodivergent couples, and non-traditional relationships, Jessica is known for reframing relationship myths, normalizing complex dynamics, and offering practical, accessible tools for navigating intimacy, conflict, and long-term connection. I'm really excited. We're going to dive into a lot of what couples think is incompatibility, which is actually some nervous system protection that's showing up. And when we can understand the attachment, the co-regulation, and the physiological linkage to these things, behavior then starts to make sense in the context. And really, that shift alone can change how partners see each other, both inside and outside of the bedroom. So, really excited for this to be a nice couples focused episode to help you guys communicate more, just be in tune more with each other. Yeah, continue listening and let us know what you think. Let's bring her on. All right. Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today. It's so good to have you.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's been nice just chatting with you already, just as we're getting started here. Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation that we're going to have just around the incompatibility that comes up for so many people. And I love that you shared this. This is something that a label that couples often use, that term incompatibility. And your approach to this is actually a nervous system protection. Can we jump right into it? Like, what do you mean by that?
So oftentimes when couples are talking about either conflict or sexuality, that there are, clashes between the two, and they assume that's because maybe we're just not that compatible, maybe we're falling out of love, maybe we've been together too long, all these sorts of ideas. But oftentimes there is a nervous state mismatch. So they
Hmm.
don't necessarily realize that our thoughts, our emotions are impacted by our physiology, the way our brains are influencing our bodies.
Hmm.
And so we could be stuck in a sympathetic nervous state, that's that fight or flight, or we
Hmm.
could even be stuck in kind of like a freeze or slow-mo. So hyper arousal or hypo arousal. I know you've talked about this in your
Hmm.
podcast
Hmm.
before, right? So we're not necessarily in tune with our bodies to notice when we've made that shift. And when we've made a shift like that, then we're not in touch with our prefrontal cortex, that thinking, planning, executive functioning parts of our brains,
Hmm.
so that we could really understand each other. We can empathize, we can notice nuances in the conversation if we're talking about conflict, or in each other's bodies, or where we're at when it comes to sexual intimacy.
Hmm.
So it's just even awareness around where we're at in our bodies and the communication around our nervous state can make a really big difference. So
Hmm.
when I talk about the incompatibility or where they think it's incompatibility, often it's that they don't realize that their partner is either in that hypo or hyper arousal state. And so they think it's about them. I'm being rejected, or I'm not enough, or I'm not attractive enough, or something like that. But really, they just need to check in with themselves and check in with their partner.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a really good approach to it of yeah, in those times where we are feeling that rejection, that's yeah, but probably both of us in that situation are don't have access to that prefrontal cortex because one of us is heightened and yeah, how I often see this play out is like one is heightened like they just initiated like fight or flight, like I gotta get out of here, I gotta resist this, I'm not ready, I'm not turned on, I don't want this maybe right now or it's bad timing. And then the other person, they might also feel like that hyper arousal around that, like, okay, now I want to maybe fight back or like get mad or attack back or cower, right? Because now I want to get out of here, flight. I need like that didn't feel good. That was uncomfy. Yeah, or that hypo, like now I'm numb, now I'm shut down, now I'm in this like mopey, like Eeyore state even. And so yeah, that's interesting to just see like it's present for both people, probably some form of dysregulation when this comes up.
Absolutely, right. Whether it is really kind of ramping up or shutting down, either way, you might even find that you find yourself oscillating between the two, right?
Hmm.
So For instance, if you are a person that experiences genital pelvic pain, right? So sexual pain, right?
Hmm.
Your partner initiates and immediately you move into that fight or flight state as you're thinking, okay, I hope this works out. I hope I don't have pain. I hope my partner doesn't feel rejected, etc. And
Hmm.
then as you move into the sexual intimacy, that then you kind of go down and to the other side.
Hmm.
And now you're sort of numbing out in order to really
Hmm.
cope with the sexual intimacy, which only exacerbates things because
Hmm.
you're not necessarily in touch with yourself, let alone your partner.
Hmm. Yeah.
So you can experience more pain in that instance.
Yeah, yeah, because I like to call them like the bodyguards are coming online, like the protectors are coming into play, like trying to keep us from experiencing that pain or, and that could, yeah, either that be physical pain or emotional pain that might be coming up. Um, yeah, and you talk a lot then about like co-regulation. And so for couples to be able to bring this into play. So if I'm noticing, if I'm in this partnered experience and I know notice myself starting to check out or I start to feel some pain and discomfort and I maybe don't have access to my voice or I'm scared to like speak up and say like, hey, I need some change or I need to slow down or whatnot. And I find myself in that numb state. How could a tool such as co-regulation come into play to benefit both people in that sense?
I love this question. So first, I think it's important to define what co-regulation is. And for
Mhm.
today, anyway, the way I want to
Mhm.
describe it is that it's the way that our nervous systems influence each other to help us stay regulated. So whether
Mhm.
that's one regulated nervous system helping the other to be regulated, or maybe both of you coming together to regulate each other's nervous systems.
Mhm.
And so humans are hardwired to read safety through cues like tone of voice, eye contact, pace, touch, presence, things like that.
Mhm.
And so when you are reading the signals from your partner that it is a safe environment, it tends to be regulating.
Mhm.
So some of the practices that you can use are around those cues. So paying attention to the tone of your voice, slowing down the pacing of your voice, slowing down the pacing of touch,
Mhm.
and thinking about the touch that you're using, being very intentional with that, and slowing down to just be present with one another. So maybe
Mhm.
that means taking time to just breathe and express where your nervous state is, which may take some practice to learn how to tune into and also how to communicate. But checking in with yourself, doing your best to communicate where you're at in your nervous system, as well as what kind of touch or presence you need right now to feel safe and connected. So
Mhm.
you could just stop, slow down, connect in that way. Breathe together because we know that this elicits a parasympathetic nervous response. So that's that calming, connected response. So you
Mhm.
may take time to breathe together, use eye contact, sway together. Movement also helps.
Mhm.
So these
Mhm.
are some of the practices that we could use to help us to co-regulate in the moment, and we could do this at any time. So
Mhm.
it's often a transition ritual, right, from
Mhm.
your busy day to intimacy, whether that's sexual or not, just really connecting together. Um,
Mhm.
but you could do it at any time if you need to. So
Mhm.
maybe even in the midst of sexual intimacy that you've already began sexual touch, but you slow things down a little bit and you
Mhm.
take time to, like I said, sway or something like that. Just connect
Mhm.
with each other in that moment.
Mhm. Yeah, and I like that you mentioned this as being a transitional exercise because I think sometimes when we're feeling like that dissociation happening or that dysregulation happening, we think, oh shit, right? Like this needs to stop. I'm going to ruin this moment or I'm going to ruin what we have here. But just even in the way that you were just describing, I'm like, this co-regulation could be like so sensual and so erotic, even like an experience to be able to have together. It reminds me of like the world of Tantra, right? Like using eye gazing and breath work and movement and sound and all of that in the space of intimacy. And so, yeah, I think if we can help people or anybody's listening, like really get creative in how that, yeah, like just how that can look for people. It doesn't have to be this, it's too much. Like we need to stop it, right? Like, that can be that transition, that ease into something else. And yeah, for the person that's listening that is supporting somebody through dysregulation, that's such a gift that you can give them, especially if you are feeling safe in that moment, to be able to lend your nervous system to somebody that is feeling activated or is not feeling safe in their body, their experience, their emotion, whatever is coming up for them.
And honestly, when the nervous system settles, closeness and erotic responsiveness become more available. right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it really is a prerequisite for that type of connection as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's taking us a little bit deeper into the intimacy in the bedroom space. And so, can you speak a little bit more on how the nervous system protection impacts our desire, arousal, and maybe even initiation?
So if we are in a dysregulated state, whether that's a little bit more numb or a little bit more activated, heightened, our arousal system and physiologically is not going to be able to work.
Mm-hmm.
So we do need to, we need to be in sort of a regulated state optimally to be able to respond with all the things that our bodies does to prepare for a
Mm-hmm.
sexual connection, right? So that's, blood flow, vasoconstriction, that's lubrication, all those physiological pieces that we need to at least feel arousal within our bodies, which is different than desire. Right? They're
Mm-hmm.
related, but they're different, right? So if we're dysregulated, then those processes are disrupted or at least somewhat inhibited. So not working in the same way. So
Mm-hmm.
when we slow down and we connect in this way, then that provides the opportunity for our bodies to be able to respond naturally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's what we need to focus on, right?
Yeah.
So we need to start with that. And then in terms of actual sexual intimacy, when you're engaging in sex acts, whether that's solo or partnered, we need to start with that. But interestingly enough, our nervous systems do need to move through a sympathetic nervous state, that more activated state in order to get to orgasm and
Mm-hmm.
ejaculation and things like that, if that's a part of your sexual intimacy practices.
Mm-hmm.
So our nervous systems need flexibility. It's not that it's an on-off switch between those two, the heightened state or the hypoarousal state, and then
Mm-hmm.
when we're regulated, it's just in the middle, and that's perfect, and we stay there. In reality, our bodies are always kind of like a seesaw, moving back and forth between the two, and we tend to have a certain baseline somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
So we do need the flexibility to move through it. So if we're
Mm-hmm.
just too high, high or too low, low, then our bodies won't be able to respond and
Yeah.
we won't be able to connect. And that might come up as a psychological sense that I don't feel safe or I don't feel connected. It
Mm-hmm.
just it just doesn't feel like the time. And so that's where responsive sexual arousal might come into play for a lot of people, right? So a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people are aware of Basson's research around responsive sexual desire, meaning that for a lot of people, they either rarely experience spontaneous sexual desire or they don't really experience spontaneous sexual desire. And they need some kind of cues towards sexual intimacy, whether that be touch or the nervous system cues we're talking about with the,
Mm-hmm.
the pacing, eye contact, etc., in order to begin to respond or for their physiological response of arousal to kick in, and then for their psychological experience of, oh yeah, I want this. This feels
Mm-hmm.
good. I'm
Mm-hmm.
desiring this now, right?
Yeah.
So the nervous system is a prerequisite for the physiological arousal, which for a lot of people is a prerequisite for the psychological experience of desire.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. That was such a good point that you made too. It was like it's like we want to start in that regulated state, where we're in that rest and digest, we're in that good, we're regulated, we're aware, we're feeling safe, and then I like that you put voice to it. Is like as things get going and ramping up, we're going to be back into that fight or flight, right? Like that more hyper active state. But it's difference in like it's like I still want to be here. It's not like fight or flight coming up and like I got to get out of here. I need to fight back. It's like it's that heightened state of the nervous system that yeah, am I saying that right? Like is there truth to that? Like I can be in that heightened state and still feel safe there.
Absolutely, right? So sometimes people think of that heightened state only as a survival response, but it's
Mhm.
also where our bodies are at, our nervous systems are at when we're highly active, when
Mhm.
we're deeply involved in learning, right? So it's
Mhm.
it's um it's ready for movement, it's ready for awareness. So certainly in that state, we
Hmm.
can be really happy to be there and it feels good. A
Hmm.
lot of the times, though, couples try to connect either deeply emotionally or sexual through sexual intimacy without trying to transition into a state, into a nervous state that is conducive to that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they might just be like, okay, let's be intimate. You're right. Like, let's have, do you want to have sex? Right? Let's do
Hmm.
it.
Yeah.
Or, hey, we need to talk.
Yeah.
Right? And right away jumping into it, not understanding that maybe their partner's not in a place to really have that conversation or engage in those behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah, like working on that attunement first. I would couples and people that I'm working with, I often recommend like before coming together with a conversation, having a check-in, either a red, yellow, green light, and like where's the energy at? What are we feeling? Like what are we bringing in into this conversation or into this discussion? And then starting with something like co-regulate, like breathing together, eye gazing together, rocking, swaying, sharing a slow dance together, a long hug, anything like that. And then going into the conversation. So I call it like you need to create the love bubble first, like create this safety, like this closeness before going into your conversations, especially if it's like an intentional conversation, like a hard conversation might be about to take place. This I feel like you were just setting ourselves up for success when that happens, and giving some guidelines too. It's like, okay, if at any point during this, like you're feeling yourself like reaching that activated state, like here's what we can do, like invitation to let me know so that we can take that pause and we can come back to center or present with what we're discussing.
I love what you mentioned there, where you're building it in for that
Hmm.
as well,
Hmm.
that that's sort of the expectation that that might come up and it's okay, rather
Hmm.
than there's something wrong simply by stopping to check in or slowing down. I also really love that you mentioned the red, yellow, green light, right? That so that comes from the kink community, and they
Hmm.
do
Hmm.
consent and trust and checking in so well.
Hmm.
And so it's baked in already to their negotiations often. And
Hmm.
so that's something that we could all really learn from and benefit
For
from.
sure. Yeah, I say that all the time. I'm like, you want to get really good at boundaries, go into a kink space, or you want to learn really well like what consent looks like and like go into a kink space, go to a sex party, go to like something like this. Like you will see it laid out like that. And so yeah, and it sounds like you do some work that you're working with the LGBTQIA plus population, neurodivergent, let me re-say that. It looks like you're doing work that includes the LGBTQIA plus population as well as the neurodivergent population and more of those non-traditional relationships. Does any, yeah, I feel like I'm giving you a softball here. Like, does this work any differently for people than if I'm neurodivergent, if I'm not neurodivergent, if I'm lesbian, if I'm gay, if I'm trans? Like, does our nervous systems look different based on who we identify as people?
So people are people when it comes to our
Mhm.
physiology. I would say that when it comes to neurodivergence in particular, however, right, that is sort of the definition of it, right? Their
Mhm.
neurology diverges from what is typical. And
Mhm.
so for a lot of these people, their sensory experiences are a little bit different. So they can have sensitivities to different sensory inputs and stimuli. So they
Mhm.
could get dysregulated a little bit easier, quicker in some cases because they become overstimulated, for example, right?
Mhm.
Um, in the sexual context, for instance, it may even get a little bit tricky. So it's not just about maybe there's too much noise or stimulation, right? It could be something different, like the sense of wetness or something like
Mhm.
that, right?
Mhm.
Try to engage in, at least when it comes to penetrative intercourse, right? Try to engage in that without any kind of wetness. It's difficult,
Mhm.
right? So often there are interventions for working with that.
Mhm.
When it comes to the kink space, then you have to be even more attuned to the nervous state. If you're engaging in, say, a scene, let's say a kink scene where you're
Mhm.
engaging in those behaviors, right? Even more important to check in, and that's why it's already baked into the
Mhm.
consent and negotiation processes in the kink space. So
Mhm.
it can look a little different because you are intentionally trying to elicit certain responses in the nervous system that are a little bit different than in typical sexual intimacy, like when it comes to like pain and things like that, for instance,
Mhm.
right? Or like temperature play, things like that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, thanks again for sharing that. And this just, I talk about this often on the show of like how important it is to bring curiosity into our experiences and not assuming that people are going to be all the same. So the people that I'm having sex with or even talking with, like that they're going to be reacting and responding in the same way that I will, and looking at that as, not that they're wrong, just that they are different, right? They have a different experience to this. And so when we can approach that with that curiosity, so if I have a partner that's like, whoa, I'm like really overstimulated or ooh, things are like too wet. That's like, okay, like tell me more. Like what do we need to do here, right? It's not like that shame and blame that we're placing on them.
Absolutely. Curiosity is so important and not making jumping to assumptions. So I know a dungeon owner who likes to tell people that come in who he educates, when people say, "Oh, I'm up for anything," right?
Hmm.
Then you push the boundaries and you let them know, "Okay, so I could cut off your arm."
Yeah. Yep.
Right? There are some what we call edge play, some extreme practices. So like scarification, right? Where you're like scarring your partner, right?
Hmm.
You don't just jump right into that with a new partner anyway. And it really is sort of less common even in the kink community, in the kink space, right?
Hmm.
But you really want to be very intentional. And so a part of that is being curious and not jumping to conclusions or making assumptions about what your partner likes, doesn't like, what their limitations are, everything like that, right? It's
Hmm.
important to understand. So I think you brought up a really good point that if your partner is giving you some feedback, it's feeling too wet, that
Hmm.
you approach not with blame, shame, right? But curiosity, right?
Hmm.
And that
Yeah.
can be difficult to do if we are feeling triggered by that, right? It's too
Hmm.
wet. Am I too wet? Is what's going on
Hmm.
here, right? And
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
not, I'm somehow not satisfying you in this way, that there could be a knee-jerk response to assume that this is about you or you've done something wrong, even if it is related to something, right? That
Hmm.
your lubrication, let's say, is overwhelming for your partner. They're not saying that you've
Hmm.
done something wrong. They're giving you information. And so
Yeah.
that's an invitation to find out more. And it really speaks to the relationship that they feel comfortable enough to share that with you in that moment.
Hmm.
So you could take it more as information and that it's trust building, and you can learn more about your partner by
Hmm.
asking those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some other relationship myths that you really like to challenge in the work that you do?
Because I work a lot with I'd say like you mentioned, the LGBTQ plus kink, non-monogamy, expansive relationships, space. I
Hmm.
think I get a lot of people that come to me and say, "Oh, that's really challenging work." That's for instance, people, let's say for the expansive relationship structures, that's for people who aren't jealous.
Hmm.
I'm too jealous for that. I can't manage that.
Hmm.
Or even in the kink space too, because sometimes there's non-exclusive relationships in that space as well.
Yeah.
So they kind of approach it that way, but I let them know that jealousy is an evolved emotion, and so we all experience jealousy. It's
Hmm.
what you do with that.
Hmm.
So generally, the people in these spaces know how to manage that through
Hmm.
negotiations, intentional agreements. We can all benefit from communication, intentionality, and really coming to a place of understanding not only what works for the two of you, but continuously co-constructing that with your partner.
Hmm.
So not just again relying on this assumptions.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think people in these spaces do a really good job of that, and we could learn a lot from them, right?
Hmm.
So that's one myth.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good one too. Or a common one that I hear is like I'm too vanilla or I'm not kinky enough to be in those spaces. And it's like, well, if you go to bdsmtest.org and you fill that out, like vanilla is a profile on there. Like vanilla is a kink profile. There are tons of people that, right, like being vanilla is their kink or being with somebody that is vanilla is their kink. And so Yeah, that's one that I like to debunk. And also with kink exploration, like there's such a wide spectrum of what somebody deems as being kinky. You know, for instance, somebody that uses sex toys, like that could be a level 10 kink to somebody versus right, like for me, for instance, right, like that's level 1 for me. It's like sex toys are just the norm in our relationship. And or right, like using whips and floggers and ropes and things like that, that could be a level 10 for somebody, whereas somebody else, like that's a part of their normal everyday play. And so it's yeah, it's one of my favorite part of when I go down that kink exploration with people. I'm like, all right, so like what is kinky? Like what is kinky to you? Like what does it mean to you? And so yeah, that's a big one when I hear that like not kinky enough. I'm like, nah, we're all a little kinky.
And also, let's not forget that our sexuality is always developing and it looks
Hmm.
different, not only minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, but over time, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
our interests can shift, our orientations, whether that's sexual or their relationship or their orientation towards kink practices can change
Hmm.
at any point. And I'd say, if you are very vanilla, exposing yourself to, that kind of education or even going to observe, let's say, at a lifestyle party or a dungeon or something
Hmm.
like that won't make you kinky. It won't turn you kinky.
Yeah. Turn
Either it
turn you
excites you
kinky,
or
turn
it
you
doesn't.
gay. Yeah.
Right. Or turn you gay, something like that, right?
Yeah.
That won't happen. But what you could possibly do is learn something,
Hmm.
and it may actually excite you.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
something that doesn't maybe excite you today might tomorrow. So
Hmm.
maybe being open-minded to that sexual development over time
Hmm.
is helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's like also so important in relationships too. It's like what's on the menu today? Like what's the flavor that we're going for today? Because you're right. Like one day it might be like I want like a soft sensual experience, and the other day I might next day even like I might want to be tied up. Like I might want to have some spankings or have some ropes on me. And so yeah, I think that's super important to be able to check in, and also the conversation of capacity too. So going back to kind of nervous systems, like what do we have capacity for? In our intimacy space today.
And I love that you brought up rope bondage too, because that's
Hmm.
a perfect example of really the spectrum of interest versus behavior and engagement in that area.
Hmm.
So there's a big overlap between the LGBTQ plus community and the expansive relationship community and the kink and BDSM communities. So
Hmm.
because of that overlap, you might find yourself exposed if you're in the one of those communities to the others, right?
Hmm.
So there are people who are engaged in rope bondage, for example, who love the artistry and technique of it and love
Hmm.
the community, but for them, it doesn't necessarily do anything for them. But maybe
Hmm.
it does for their partner, right? And so it's
Hmm.
something that they're open to and provides some variety and some spice, like you said, right?
Hmm.
You're into different things at different times, but
Hmm.
it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be gung ho about it or jump into it or that's your favorite kink, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And thank you so much, yeah, for coming on again today. I really think this conversation is so powerful because it really takes couples out of that blame place, and more into that understanding. And I really think that that alone can just create so much more compassion, and connection between people. And so I know that you practice out of California, but if people are wanting to learn more about you or connect with you, how can people connect with you?
Yeah, if you want to work with me as a therapist, you do need to be in
Hmm.
California. But I do have some resources on my website, workshops that I offer, things like that. So you could reach me at on Instagram at Jessica Idoine. So that's Jessica, Jessica, Idoine, Idoine, and also at EC Retreats. So I have two different handles there. And then also at my website at jessicaidoine.com.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And as we wrap here, is there one final word or encouragement that you would like to give listeners that are on with us today?
I would just like to say that in any space and relationships, intentionality and presence are everything.
Mm,
So take time to put down your phone and really give your partner eye contact, really connect, even if it's just for a short while. We're all busy. So that will help you have the closest relationship, the best sexual intimacy you can, all the things that
Mhm.
you could think of in relationships. It starts with really connecting with your partner, being present and being intentional.
Yes, ditto. Thank you again so much for coming on to the show today. It was really a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me on, Rachel.